wonderful to be in the company of youth, because you guys are the future. I have been specifically asked to share my experiences with you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to relate 3 stories from my life. I think each of the story will have a message, and I will try and articulate that message at the end of each story. So the year is this is the first story. The year is 1989. I have just finished winning 2 world billiard titles. In the January of 1989, I go to Guntur to play the nationals, and I make a world record break of 147 in snooker. I thought at the time that I was at the peak of my career. 1989, I was playing for almost 15 years. And it was a heady feeling, you know, terrific. You're 28 years old, you have 2 world titles, and you've just created a world record. By February of 1989, my game collapsed. It completely and totally collapsed. Now, what do I mean by collapsed? I mean that in a benchmark of 0 to 100, if I was performing at 90, I was now performing at 8, 9, and 10. If I was making a break of 600 every week, I was now unable to accumulate even 90 points on the billiard table. So for a world champion, a 2-time world champion, just created a record, and suddenly you can't play the sport anymore. It's a time of introspection. I had to do deep introspection to figure out what went wrong. How can you suddenly not be able to play? So this story is about the story of this failure and how I attempted and how I got out of it. So in billiards, as in everything, as in walking, as in sailing, as in cricket, there is technique involved. Now, I played as a youngster, and through the years when I started until 1989, I was what is called an instinctive player. So I played with instinct. I was never taught by anybody. And as I was growing up and as I was playing, people, the pundits, kept giving me pieces of advice saying that your technique is not right, and that somewhere down the line you will find trouble. But you know, in youth, when things are going well, you don't listen to advice. Everything's going well, and you just continue the way you are going on. Now what was happening was that I was doing 5 things wrong, but by some freaky chance, the 5 things wrong that I was doing, it made the one essential thing in my game, and that is the delivery of the cue needs to be straight. Somehow the cue was going straight. So one wrong, I had a wrong bridge, was being compensated by another wrong. Instead of my bridge hand being like this, I put it like this. And I'm supposed to stand in a particular way with my left leg forward. To compensate for the first wrong, I was standing with my right leg forward, and on and on and on. Not only 5, sometimes it was 7, 8, 9 or 10 various variables, all wrong, but coming together, the cue was going straight. But when you're doing 6 wrong things, you have no frame of reference. There's something called copybook. So a copybook stands, or this is the way things need to be done in golf, or this is the way things, you know, production in a factory needs to be done in a particular way, which has been processized over a period of time. And I had no point of reference. So the minute I started the 5 wrong things that I was doing, one of the things I changed slightly, everything went into turmoil. And that was when I did the introspection, that's what I figured out. Now, having played with a particular technique for 15 years, having won 2 world titles, I was faced with a dilemma. To improve, I needed to learn a new technique. But if I ask each one of you, You know, the way you walk, there is massive technique in the way we walk. If you look at each one of, if you wear a shoe for 4 years, the same shoe, you will realize how wrong your technique is by the way the heel of the shoe gets, it kind of gets eroded. And if I ask you that, can you now change your walking stance or style, you will need to de-learn everything that you did for the last 20 years or the last 30 years or the last 45 years. So I was faced with this dilemma, and I said, I will de-learn my technique and I will start learning a new technique, a copybook technique. It's very easy to say it. 1989 to 1992 was the most frustrating period of my life. For 3 years, and I was still a world champion, so I was going constantly for tournaments. For 3 years, I performed at 10% efficiency of my performance. For 3 years, it was the most confusing time because I tried new techniques every day. Someday I changed my bridge. It worked for 3 days. And I thought, I've got it. And then it collapsed. This went on for 3 years. I went searching for advice. Earlier, people were giving me advice and I would tell them, I don't need advice. And now I went searching for advice. I went to a coach called Frank Callan. I met Steve Davis and asked him, what can I do right? And slowly, with various pieces of information, with various pieces of advice, I started reconstructing a new technique. Now, I used to work very hard. To win 2 world titles, you need to work hard. I used to work 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours sometimes in a day. But in this time when my game collapsed, I figured out that I had to redefine the meaning of hard work as I had visualized hard work to be. And such is the power of confusion that until clarity comes, you get obsessed. And I started practicing not 9 hours, not 10 hours, I started practicing 15 hours. I used to play from 10 in the morning to 5 in the morning the next day. It was a time when I used to wake up in the middle of the night at 2 in the morning because I would think, maybe tomorrow I need to try this new technique out. Maybe the grip, I need to put slightly more pressure on the grip. Those are the kind of nuances that I was looking at. So a slightly heavier grip, and maybe I need to change my stance. And I would go in front of the mirror at 2 in the morning saying that this is the stance I'm going to practice on the billiard table tomorrow morning. And I would wake up again at 3 o'clock, and I would wake up again at 4 o'clock. And I was married at the time. I got married in 1986, and my wife Kiran, she would wake up and she would start crying. And she would say, Geetu, you'll go mad. And the point is that I was going mad. The obsession to rediscover that technique and the obsession to rediscover what it meant to play well was becoming crazy. And had I not eventually cracked the technique in 1992, that's 3 years, if this confusion had continued for 1 more year, I wouldn't have been standing here because I would have been in some mental asylum, you know, just looking in front of a mirror and doing that. But that is the insanity that is required to crack something. And this story I tell you just to bring out that what mad obsession can do to you. I stopped socializing completely. I became a complete recluse. Not because I wasn't a social banda or I wasn't a social guy. I didn't have the time. I needed 25 hours in a day to constantly figure out what I was doing wrong to get rid of the confusion. I stopped going for parties. I stopped going for weddings. I stopped going for people. My best friend's father died and I didn't go to his funeral. I stopped going for very close relatives' weddings. I became a recluse. Did I get any backlash? Sometimes, yes. I wasn't there when my son was born. My son was born in 1991 and I was in England and I had gone to meet Frank Callan, the coach who was the dada of technique in billiards and snooker. And my son was born as I was trying to figure out what should I do? Should I do this, or how should I stand? So was I selfish? Yes, I was selfish. Am I happy about the selfishness? I am extremely proud of my selfishness. Be proud of your selfishness. Be selfish when you want to go and figure out something. Be selfish. It's a good quality. The major message of this time, eventually in 1992, it clicked. It clicked first for a week, then for 10 days, and I knew it had clicked when for 1 month or almost a month and a half, with a particular technique, the balls were going in. And I was making a 300 break, and I was making a 500 break. And I went and showed it to Steve Davis, and he said, that's a brilliant stance. And I continued with that technique for 6 months. By the end of 1992, I won an international tournament in September, and then in October, in the World Championship, the World Professional Championship, I won it playing outstanding billiards. And since that day, today, I play with that technique, which was brought to me by the fact that I had failed so miserably in 1989. It was a time of huge frustration, like I have mentioned. It was the most demoralizing time that I have ever faced. But it was a time that I not once did I say, it's over. I can't play. I never gave up. In my mind, I never said that I will not rediscover this technique. In my mind, I never said, even when I was going mad, when I was touching insanity, I was going insane, but I always said, I'm going to crack it. So the message of the story is, you will fail. You will all fail. The most successful of you, the most moneyed of you, the most powerful of you, you will become unpowerful one day, if that's a word. You will lose your money. You will lose your standing in society. You will lose your job. You will lose your grades. But you can't lose your mind, and you can't lose the self-belief that this is, I'm going to crack it. I'm going to get over it, and I'm going to come back. And I think that is the message that I want to give to you. You fail today, you do great, but you will not lose in your mind. That's what is the difference between a winner and a loser. It also reflects, I think, how we define hard work. Don't define hard work from your perspective. Define hard work from the perspective of people who have worked hard, who have been inspirational, and who have set new benchmarks in hard work.